They tell you that innovation is going to save you, but they never tell you what happens when the system decides your innovation is too dangerous to allow. I want you to picture this. Every second, 9 more tires hit American landfills. Each one sits there for over 600 years, slowly releasing methane into our atmosphere. We're drowning in waste that could actually solve our housing crisis. But there's a catch. The solution has been sitting right in front of us for 50 years, and it's essentially illegal to build. This, my friends, is the story of the tire house. More than that, it's a story of how regulatory comfort trumps planetary survival every single time. So let's talk about building a house out of rammed earth tires makes it incredibly energy efficient, earthquake resistant, and it's virtually free. Architect Michael Reynolds figured this out way back in the 1970s, creating what he called Earthship Biotecture, which is exactly what this channel is all about. These buildings solve 2 environmental crises at the same time. So here's the question that should keep you up at night. Why won't your local building inspector let you do it? The answer is not about safety. It's about something a little bit more insidious. It's about a system that would rather watch the planet burn than admit it doesn't have all the answers written down in a damn code book. Okay? Every year we discard about 1 billion tires across this globe. 75% still end up in landfills despite all of our amazing recycling efforts. But here's what they don't want you to try and calculate. There's a construction method that could turn this waste stream into a carbon negative set of housing. We're talking about preventing 613 kilograms of CO2 emissions per ton of tire material that they would use. I've seen this pattern before. The solution exists. The math works. The environmental benefits are quite staggering. But, the paperwork doesn't exist, so we pretend the solution doesn't exist either. Back in the 1970s, Michael Reynolds graduated from the University of Cincinnati, and he immediately started doing things that made the entire construction industry a little bit nervous. His thesis appeared in Architectural Record in 1971. By 1972, he built his first structure out of beer cans. I did another video on this. You can go back and check it out. By 1979, he constructed his first true tire-walled home in New Mexico. Reynolds understood something that what seemed like the entire building industry did not want to face. Those discarded tires, they weren't waste. They were a natural resource that were literally hiding in plain sight. The concept was elegantly simple, and the environmental math was a bit staggering. Take a used automobile tire, fill it with compacted earth until it's about 95% packed, and you've created a rammed earth brick encased in steel-belted rubber weighing over 300 pounds. Now, stack those quote-unquote concrete bricks, and you'll get walls 36 inches thick with massive thermal mass that regulate interior temperature naturally. Yeah, a typical Earthship uses about 900 tires, 2,000 glass bottles, and maybe 10,000 aluminum cans. Those 900 tires represent roughly 551 tons of prevented CO2 emissions. That's the equivalent of taking 120 cars off the road every single year. But hold on here. Here's something I think might just piss you off. They work. Even at negative 15 degrees outside, these structures hold steady at 55 degrees or more without any heat source. They collect their own rainwater. They generate their own electricity. They treat their own sewage. Reynolds wanted to build homes that anyone could create using materials indigenous to every city on this earth. Why? Because used tires, they're everywhere. We've all seen them. At least 2.5 billion are stockpiled in the United States right this very minute while you're listening to me, with millions more being discarded every single year. Reynolds calls them a natural resource. The system that you and I are a part of calls them garbage. Yeah. So what's the real problem here? Why are we choosing regulatory comfort over planetary survival? Well, the problem is that tire foundations and tire walls are not an acceptable solution in any building code or any building code book. Period. End of story. Hard stop. There are currently no certified design guidelines or code provisions available for tire wall systems anywhere in the world. At least in my research, I couldn't find any. When you walk into the permitting office with Earthship construction drawings, The building inspector doesn't have a chapter in the International Residential Code that tells them how to evaluate what it is you're trying to build, what you're proposing. There's no standardized engineering table for rammed earth tire walls the way there is for concrete block or dimensional lumber. Yeah. So they don't know what to do with it. You're asking a government official to approve something that they have no framework to improve, even if it could help solve the climate crisis. Right? Yeah, go figure. And this isn't about whether the structure is strong enough. In 2022, the University of Southern Australia published a landmark study that should have changed everything. Dr. Martin Frenet and PhD candidate, I'm gonna butcher this name, Yashong Zhu, subjected a full-scale tire wall to rigorous structural testing. The results were definitive. The tire walls proved as structurally sound as concrete or wood retaining walls. Hard stop. They can resist an equivalent flood pressure of 36 pounds per cubic foot in a freestanding condition. And here's what caught my attention. Dr. Frenet noted something a bit remarkable. Quote, unlike concrete walls, these walls have the ability to bounce back into shape following impact, such as from an earthquake, unquote. A rigid concrete wall cracks and possibly fails. A tire wall flexes and returns to form. Then came the quote that I think reveals the whole pattern. Quote, the lack of supporting data has prevented wider uptake of firewalls by engineers and architects, and we're hoping this study will change that, unquote. One peer-reviewed study in 2022 after 50 years of Earthship construction. That's not a structural engineering problem. That's a documentation problem that has been masquerading as a safety issue. Just in one man's opinion, the gap, I think, has real consequences, and Michael Reynolds paid them personally. 1990, State Architect Board of New Mexico stripped him of his license. He spent 17 years fighting and struggling and scratching and clawing to finally get it back, succeeding in 2007. But that battle, he estimated, spent 75% of his money and his time fighting to build sustainable housing, and only 25% of it actually doing that building. Right? Why? The man was once dismissed as a freak in the desert building out of garbage. Now, MoMA has acquired one of his original canned bricks for $4,500. His work has been exhibited at the Louvre. Yeah, people are recognizing him. 50 years later, the pattern's always the same. Let's be honest here. First, they ignore you. Then they fight you, usually hoping you'll just go away. Then they put your work in a museum and pretend they've been supporting you all along. Yeah, oh, what a great guy. Reynolds never stopped evolving. He's 80 years old now. And at 80 years old, he's adapting Earthships for our climate's reality. His latest innovation is the refuge model. At $350 per square foot, it addresses rising material costs while maintaining all the environmental benefits. Even more revolutionary is his upcoming disaster-resistant vault model, launching, I think it's supposed to be spring of 2026, should be coming out any time now. It's April 28th as I'm recording this right now. This buried concrete structure with minimal wood content is designed to withstand tornadoes, withstand hurricanes, and withstand fire. He's positioning Earthships not just as sustainable housing, but as climate adaptation infrastructure. Why? Because he sees the pattern the rest of us are still pretending doesn't exist. Well, many of us, maybe not you, because you're here listening to this right now. The regulatory landscape has improved slightly. I don't want to shed all negative light here. Back in 2007, New Mexico passed a Sustainable Development Testing Site Act. Currently, you can obtain a permit to build an Earthship in New Mexico, in Pennsylvania, in Wyoming, in Nevada, Colorado, Florida, and Virginia. Virginia passed the Green Development Zone legislation back in 2017, though only a few localities have actually been designated those zones. North Carolina may open some doors with anticipated building code changes that are supposed to be coming this year in 2026, but outside of these pockets I've just mentioned, permit approval remains, let's say, extraordinarily difficult. 7 states out of 50. After 50 years of proven performance. You make your own judgment there, right? There are real issues that critics tend to raise, and they deserve an honest examination. So let's dig into it a little bit right here. Off-gassing is the biggest one. Proponents argue that the tires don't decompose when packed with soil and sealed behind stucco because they're not exposed to sunlight, to heat, or any of the oxidizing agents. Reynolds' organization claims 30 years of development with 0 instances of illness from said off-gassing. Critics counter that nobody has done a comprehensive toxicology study or any studies. One critic put it like this, quote, "Whenever the conversation turns to genuine recycling of old tires, there is no science, and nobody who makes a confident statement about toxicity actually knows," unquote. That's about as honest of an assessment that I can share with you of where we stand right now. Now, climate limitations are another real issue. Let's chat about them for a moment. Earthships were designed for the arid desert of northern New Mexico. In human environments, moisture collects along the interior wall surfaces, creating conditions potentially for mold and algae growth. Some Earth-sheltered Earthships have suffered heat loss from the ground during heating season. Now, let's be honest, these aren't trivial problems, but they're engineering challenges. I don't think those are reasons to abandon the concept entirely. They can be figured out. Can't they? I think so. And then there's the labor question. Pounding tires takes roughly 2 hours per tire. Multiply that by 900 tires, and you begin to understand why it takes twice as long to build an Earthship as it does a conventional home. Despite the recycled materials, costs aren't necessarily lower. A professional Earthship build runs $300 to $400 per square foot. Now, compare that to $150 for a conventional green home. The resale value averages $191 per square foot. You could lose $34 per square foot if you try to sell. And here's another one. Good luck trying to get a mortgage on building an Earthship. I'm just saying. Banks label Earthships as experimental architecture, making traditional financing just about impossible. Reynolds, as I mentioned, 80 years old now, and demand for Earthship is, in his words, skyrocketing. He can't build them fast enough, but he's still fighting. Currently, he's battling a state engineer over well permits for the Greater World Earthship community near Taos in New Mexico. 130 home sites sit on 640 acres. The original variants allowed 1 well for the entire community. The new engineer wants 1 well per 12 homes. Reynolds has hired a water lawyer. 15 years in, and he's still spending more time fighting the system than building his solution. And here's what I want you to take away from this whole story here. We're facing a climate emergency. We hear about it all the time. And we're also facing a housing crisis simultaneously. You hear about someone talking about climate. You hear someone over here talking about housing, the homeless. The tire house works. The structural engineering supports it. The thermal performance is remarkable. The environmental benefits could be massive. The alternative materials are abundant beyond imagination. They're piling up in our dumps at 9 tires per second, right? Imagine how many tires have been tossed into landfills while you're listening to me right now. But the system that decides what you're allowed to build doesn't run on proof of concept or even environmental necessity. It runs on codified standards, certified guidelines, and engineering tables that simply don't exist yet for this particular construction method. One university in Australia, well, that's a start, but it's not a building code. If you're serious about building with tires, here's your real checklist. Start with your local permitting office before you buy any land. Find out if they'll consider alternative compliance based on a structural engineer's calculations. Get an engineer who actually understands Earthship design. Target the 7 states where the permits are currently available. Mentioned them earlier. And budget for the fight. Because Mike Reynolds will tell you, 50 years in, the fight is still the biggest part of his job. The solution of 2 of our biggest crises is literally rotting away in our dumps. But we're choosing regulatory comfort over planetary survival. The code books haven't caught up to the climate emergency. They just haven't. Every day we wait, 9 more tires hit the landfill. Another opportunity for carbon negative housing, poof, disappears into the bureaucratic inertia. The question, my friends, isn't whether you can build houses out of tires. The question is whether you can build a regulatory system that matches the urgency of our environmental reality. And right now, the answer is clear. We'd rather watch the world burn than admit our rulebook might be incomplete.